Hello everyone. Welcome. Yeah, I see a few people are starting to join. Welcome to Civil Society Media's second Instagram live event. I'm Val, I'm fundraising reporter at Fundraising Magazine and Civil Society News. And I'm just gonna give it another couple of minutes as usual before calling our guest in. In the meanwhile, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. And while we wait, for those who did not tune in last time, I'm just gonna briefly explain what is this thing that we're doing. So our Instagram live event is a fundraising coffee break, so to speak. So the idea was that times are really difficult out there for fundraisers, and also we cannot meet up, we cannot talk about problems. So we wanted to create a space where we can share creative idea and talk about all things fundraising, hopefully in a very relaxed and informal environment. So not exactly like, a webinar or a virtual conference. You just take a break in the afternoon and listen to me chatting with the fundraiser about how they are adapting their campaigns to the situation. 2 weeks ago, we had our first event, which, well, I shouldn't be saying that, but it was quite good. We talked to Kelly Gibson, who is head of fundraising at Against Breast Cancer, and she told us about how they are experimenting with digital fundraising. The video is both on Civil Society Media Instagram and YouTube accounts, so if you want to catch up, you can do that. And yeah, the event lasts about 20 minutes, half an hour, and at the end of it, you just go back to work. And hopefully, feel a bit recharged and inspired, and like there's a whole community of fundraisers who share the same issues and problems. I'm gonna start now by introducing today's guest. Her name is Martha Awojobi. She is corporate partnership fundraiser for Refuge and also organizer and treasurer at Charity So White, which mostly means we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Bear with me while I call her in a second.
Hey.
Hi Martha, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. It's the first time in 2 weeks I'm wearing a shirt, so it feels pretty decent, I think.
It's nice to have a reason to put on makeup, actually. I even cut my hair last night terribly for this event.
That's good. For being not at home, it's hard. I'm going to crack on because we have quite a few things to get through, actually. And I'm going to start by asking you about your work with Refuge. Refuge supports domestic abuse survivors, and, well, like many charities, actually, it has seen demand for its helpline increase massively since the lockdown has started. It's a pretty familiar scenario. Demand for services goes through the roof. No in-person fundraising activities is allowed at the same time. So how has the charity adapted its fundraising and tried to lessen the impact of the crisis?
I think we've adapted really, really well. And actually, in the kind of before the crisis started, we were, trying out more digital and virtual events. So our head of community and events, Gabby, is an innovator. I think she's an amazing fundraiser. And she's been using Tiltify and Facebook in order to fundraise. So we kind of had a good understanding of how well that could work. So when the crisis happened, we launched a squat challenge, 100 days, 30 days. I don't know, and I should. A squat challenge that through Facebook that's raised, I think, around £80,000 last time I checked. We're also using Tiltify to get some live streaming going. I work in corporate partnerships, and I've been really inspired by some of the work that Cat Protection have done on Tiltify. So I've been encouraging my businesses to put on their own events, to live stream them doing their own versions of films and movies that they like. It's been really, really amazing, actually. And I think now is a really good time for digital engagement. So I have been putting on a series of lunch and learns for my corporate partners. So I had one with Avon recently, where we had 88 people on the call. They submitted questions anonymously about things that they've always wanted to be answered about domestic violence, because it is a difficult conversation to have. And, you know, I think some of my businesses can struggle to have those kind of day-to-day conversations about it. So it was a real kind of icebreaker. They submitted their questions. I was on the call with a helpline volunteer, and we managed to get more engagement with Avon than we've ever managed to actually get before. And it was all because we're adapting to this crisis. So, you know, there's a lot of areas of opportunity in this crisis if you're brave enough to go digital. Yeah, I think we've adapted really, really, really well. And a lot of the media attention that we've got and our amazing comms team has really, really helped us to kind of, you know, to have those open conversations and to really explain to people how urgent the situation is.
Yeah, and so talking about businesses, obviously it is a really difficult time for them as well. So, you know, what kind of language, how are you communicating with them? And, well, how are they responding? It seems positively from what you said. Did you hear that last one?
Cut out there a little bit.
It's okay. I guess, yeah, the internet connection could be better. But can you hear me now?
Yes, go again.
Sorry, yeah. I was talking about businesses. So what language are you using to communicate with them, and how are they responding?
I think it's really it's really tempting to go straight in with the ask, because, you know, it's a scary time to be in fundraising. I've really avoided doing that because, you know, even though a business is kind of a huge a machine of moving parts, the people that are my contacts, they're human beings. They're anxious, they're scared, they're grieving. So my initial conversations were, you know, how's your family? How are you doing? How kind of avoiding talking so much about, you know, what we need, meeting people on a human level, because we're all going through the same thing. And I've actually found that that's really kind of opened up conversations with people I was never really expecting to have such intimate conversations with. So, you know, I've been kind of virtually in the living rooms of CEOs that I've been trying to get meetings with for months, and suddenly I'm kind of like looking at their children's pictures on the fridge and chatting about that. So yeah, kind of having, you know, making sure that we stay personable, because this is a crisis that's affecting people as well as the economy. My focus, once we've kind of got past that personal interaction, has been on how can we help with staff engagement and morale. I think that's something that's really, really important. We're all isolated in our homes. We need to connect around something other than just work. I find, you know, Zoom calls are all about work. We don't often take that much time to kind of, you know, think about our communities. So this is a real kind of opportunity to build staff engagement in a way that, you know, we haven't really had to before. So I think it's really important to talk about staff engagement. We've also been talking a lot about, you know, how we can get messages of support out there. It's not that all businesses can give us money at the moment. So how can we amplify our messaging? How can we, you know, use their audience and their reach in order to kind of amplify Refuge's messages, and also where to get support. That's been really, really important, because people want to talk. Everyone's bored. We're all bored. Now is a really good time to get a conversation going, especially when, you know, we all feel a bit powerless as well. So what a better way to kind of get back some personal power than to support an organisation that's, you know, working with vulnerable people. And it's a really good opportunity actually for furloughed staff. If staff are furloughed, can they do a fundraising project, since they can't actually do their work? I've been asking some furloughed staff to kind of set up their own live stream fundraising events, and it's worked really, really well.
Yeah, I think it's so very true what you said, you know, that so many people are bored and looking for ways to connect with other people as well. Yeah. So moving on. Yeah. So moving on to your work with Charity So White, I think a lot of people know it, but just can you briefly introduce your organization to us and what it is and what the objectives are?
Sure. So Charity So White is a campaigning organisation. It is made of people of colour who work in and around the sector, and our goal is to root out racism in the charity sector. So we've got a really simple call to action, which is to have candid and critical conversations. And this is mainly leaders, but throughout the entire organisation, have candid, critical conversations about structural racism, to then to seek public accountability. So have those conversations internally, but talk externally about the fact that you're having those conversations and commit to change. And then to prioritise that anti-racist work into whatever institutional frameworks that you have at your disposal and dismantle those that are preventing change. We have been in a sector that has been predominantly white and hasn't really put the lived experience of communities of colour at the centre of the work that organisations do. And we have an amazing opportunity to change that. So I'm really proud to be part of Charity So White. I think some of the stuff that we've done is absolutely amazing, considering that we've only been a campaigning group for less than a year. We've managed to get in the room with some, really important people. We've had some amazing public acknowledgements of institutional racism, especially from Peter Lewis, the CEO of the Institute of Fundraising, had publicly committed to tackling racism in his organisation, and that's going to cascade out into the rest of fundraising, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. I guess things have taken a little bit of a left field since the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had to kind of shift our focus a little bit from working with sector leaders in charities to speaking to funders about how they can be prioritising racial justice in their response to COVID-19 and in the way that they distribute emergency funding.
Yeah, which is what I was just about to ask, because so talking about the current crisis, I think at this point it should be crystal clear that the crisis, the coronavirus, has been called kind of a great equalizer, but it very much is not, because BAME communities are being hit so much harder, and obviously especially from a social and economic point of view. So Charity So White has been looking into it, and especially into how the third sector, like what role it has to play into this. So can you tell us a bit about what it's found?
So we launched a live position paper when the crisis first happened, before everybody else, I'm just going to say, which was looking at kind of existing inequalities and making predictions about how COVID-19 would highlight those and exacerbate them. And our predictions were pretty much spot on. So we have made it live so that we can update it every single week. So on Monday at 9 a.m. every week, we add things to our paper so that, we've got the most up-to-date information. But we have identified 5 key areas for urgent and immediate action. And that is health inequalities, emergency measures legislation, risk of destitution, hostile environment, protection and enforcement. So I'll just go back to health inequalities. So we've seen that BAME groups are overrepresented in the at-risk category for developing a critical case of COVID-19. So people of colour actually make up 13% of the population, but they're 35% of people who have died from cases of COVID-19. That's alarm bells right there. And lots of people kind of say that it's down to genetic differences, but it's not. It's down to social and economic differences, which kind of make people at risk of developing, illnesses in the first place. That's stress, high blood pressure. So those inequalities were there, but COVID-19 has really kind of brought them to light. So not only are BAME people overrepresented in at-risk groups, there's also unequal access to healthcare and support. There is an unconscious bias in our NHS that biases white people. It does. Women of color are 200, or Black women specifically, are 234% more likely to die from complications in childbirth and pregnancy because they're simply not believed when they say they're in pain. So we're really, really, we're nervous that that's going to be repeated in the way that our healthcare system responds to COVID-19. We've also seen that healthcare workers, BAME healthcare workers, are disproportionately dying from COVID-19, with the first 10 doctors who died being BAME doctors. And that, again, is incredibly worrying for us. We've had a look at emergency legislation. The thing that sticks out to me the most in that is school closures. So with school closing, students are going to be assessed in their GCSEs and A-levels based on their teachers' perceptions of, how well they would have done. And we already know that there's a massive bias against Black boys and South Asian boys as well. So we want to make sure that there is training and thought that goes into the way that teachers assess pupils, because otherwise there's going to be a generation of young people who aren't able to live the life that they should be living because of institutional racism in the education system. We've looked at risk of destitution, and people of colour are more likely to be in insecure work. They're actually more likely to be key workers as well, but we know that key workers was low-skilled workers before the COVID-19 crisis happened. So they're at risk, higher risk of evictions, especially people in the traveller community, and they're more likely to have no recourse to public funds. And then if we look at hostile environment, we fear about data sharing between the Home Office and the NHS. We know that undocumented migrants are dying because they're too afraid to seek help, because they're afraid that they'll be deported if they go to the NHS. It's really difficult scenes that we're seeing. And the third sector has a huge role to play in making sure that we get our response right. So we are kind of meeting with funders and the people who are actually going to be distributing the funds to ensure the way that they distribute it is through an anti-racist lens and prioritises, prioritises people of colour who are being disproportionately affected. So our ask for COVID-19, for funders who are responding to COVID-19, is to ensure that at least 2 individuals who have a significant track record of championing race equality in funding are sitting on steering and oversight groups for funding, and to ensure that 20% of funding is ring-fenced for BAME-led organisations managed directly by BAME infrastructure organisations. So it seems like these are really quite out there asks, but they're not, as we just saw. I work for a organisation. A lot of money was just ring-fenced for people who are working in domestic violence fields and violence against women and girls fields. So it is possible. There just needs to be a real kind of departure from the way that things are. We want to make sure that we don't kind of do business as usual in the way that in the way that funding is allocated, because business as usual fails BAME communities. We have seen a report recently from the Ubele initiative that said that in 3 months, 9 out of 10 BAME-led organisations will no longer exist because of systematic underfunding and because they won't be getting the funding that they need throughout COVID. So that's 90% of BAME-led organisations that will cease to exist if serious action isn't taken on funding them. That's absolutely terrifying. And if we look at, the people who are disproportionately affected by COVID, they are BAME people, and BAME-led organisations are the best place to be working with those people. They are the best place, they understand the communities and they share lived experience. So now is the time to address racial inequalities in our funding. And, all funders need to acknowledge the power that they hold rather than distancing themselves for it. They need to actively value and centre at-risk communities, and they need to trust the BAME voluntary sector while recognising BAME staff and volunteers.
And so how do you feel the conversation with funders is going? Do you feel like there's been progress, that they're listening? Did we
Can you
lost
say
it
that
then?
again, please?
Yeah. No, yeah, I just said, how do you feel the conversation with funders is going? You feel like there has been progress?
I mean, you know, there is always still time to surprise me. I mean, we're getting the same excuses that, you know, we hear time and time again. There isn't enough data, there isn't enough evidence. People don't trust that BAME organizations can hold this amount of money, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I'd say it's the conversations that we have, a lot of them are public. We've actually written a piece in Third Sector this week about some of the conversations that we've had, so check it out. Fatima, who kind of started the campaign, has written an amazing article about how our conversations with funders have been going. I have to say that, you know, we're quite disappointed as things are, but there is always still time.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, isn't it? So I'm gonna move on a little bit and just ask you, like, you know, more personally, I guess. So how do you take care of yourself? Because, you know, you're doing very hard and very important work on two sides at the same time. It must be stressful. So what do you do when you need a break?
I'm not gonna lie, it is stressful. You know, there are lots of challenges. I exercise quite a lot. I was never really into running before the pandemic, but I'm trying to run every single morning, and actually I do feel good afterwards. I'm not gonna lie, even though I have mocked runners for many years. I have a really amazing friend called Pam. She is a person of color in fundraising. She fully understands everything that I'm going through when I feel like, you know, stressed out, being one of the very few people of color in Refuge and in the fundraising team. So yeah, I talked to her about it. We've got this thing where we write 3 things that we think we've done well in the day, at the end of the day, and send it to each other, and congratulate ourselves. It is really nice. I know it sounds cheesy.
No, I need that. Like, yeah, like when this conversation's over, I'm gonna ring up my friend and be like, okay, I've got a new thing we need to do.
I think, yeah, it's great. It's great to have a friend like her. I feel like she's like a big part of my self-care. I hope she's not listening because I'm like gushing about her.
So, you know, you were saying 3 things, so now I'm gonna ask you just to pick 3 qualities a fundraiser needs to have. Just 3.
I think that you need to have courage to be a fundraiser. I do see it as, like, especially in high value fundraising, it feels like a bit of a kind of David and Goliath situation that you're in, where, you know, you're this, well, I'm this little person, I'm about to ask you for £1 million. So kind of having that courage to, like, stand up and be like, this is what I believe in, this is why you should fund me. You know, this is why my organization is really important, and this is why you should listen to me. And I think that does take a lot of courage. And yeah, so I think that's the main value. And I think anyone can have courage. You know, it's a learned skill. It's not something that you're born with. It's something that you just practice over and over and over again. I think that you need to be a problem solver and have a passion for problem solving, not just solving society's problems, but solving the problems of your donors. You know, nobody comes to a charity without having a reason for it. You know, it might be to feel good, it might be to change the world, it might be to improve staff morale, or to get better brand reputation. If you can find out what that reason for that person is, then, you know, the doors are open for you. So being a problem solver is really important. And I think the final one will be the ability to kind of think on your feet and be flexible. I don't think I've ever given a proposition to a business that they've completely gone for. I've had to kind of rework it on the spot, kind of, I can see in their facial expression, so they're not feeling this. So throw that out the window and kind of, have a few tricks up my sleeve. I think that's really, really important to kind of, to have all the tricks up your sleeve, to be able to kind of, maneuver a little bit.
Just roll with it, yeah. Yeah. So I've got one last question for you, but before I'm gonna turn the comments back up, because this way people who are listening can ask questions. So if someone who's watching has a question, can you please put it in the comments and say, who you are and what charities you're from? And after this question, I'll chat through them and ask the questions to Martha. So yeah, my last question was, even at this time, what do you like about your job? Why do you fundraise?
I fundraise. I mean, obviously I love working for charities. I've been doing it for a really long time, but actually I have like a personal reason, is that I love the thrill of it. I think it's an amazing feeling to get a yes when you've worked really hard to cultivate a relationship, to put some ideas together that you think absolutely bang, and you're like, yes, I'm going to come at you with my ideas, you're going to absolutely love them, and hearing no's along the way. But when you get that yes, it feels so good, because that not only is it your organization that has wowed this person, but it's also you or me. And I think the thrill of kind of putting yourself out there, because a lot of it is based on your personality, being able to work out what it is that makes people tick, it's absolutely thrilling. And then being able to do some good at the same time, like that's an added bonus.
Yeah, I think I know the feeling. Like for us, it's usually the thrill we'll get when we put an article out there that we're really proud of and people like it. It's kind of like the same sensation. So I don't think there was any question for now, so I'm just gonna ask a last one myself, and then we'll wrap it up. And my last question would be, so there are obviously there's a lot of fundraising happening, and there are lots of campaigns happening. So what do you think makes a charity stand out at this time?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question, actually. What makes a charity stand out at this time? I think being bold really does. Being bold, and kind of, like being unafraid to not be emotional. I think that's it. I think now is a really emotional time, and harnessing that emotion is something that people can really connect to. So I think being bold and being vulnerable, as an organization, because we all know that charities are struggling. Like, there's no need to keep that a secret. We don't need to pretend. So having that kind of like vulnerability, and personal connection is always going to be a winner, I think.
There's actually, Russell, who's a colleague of mine, he says, do you encounter surprise from potential donors that women's refuges require charitable funding rather than being paid for by government?
Do you know what? I actually don't. I actually have not, and I think that's quite sad, isn't it? Because you would expect people to be a little bit more surprised, but I think people are kind of aware of the systematic lack of funding that VORG organisations are having to deal with. So unfortunately, I don't get much surprise at all. I think everybody's aware that this should be paid for by the government, but I think we've all kind of accepted the reality that it isn't, and that there is and it's not just the government that has a role to play in ending domestic abuse and gender-based violence. It's the entirety of society. It's about changing mindsets. It's about changing business and working cultures, as well as providing those refuge spaces. So so I think partly it's quite good that we've all got our we're all involved. But when it comes to providing refuge spaces, we do get that money from the government, but it's our kind of like outside service provision that does come from elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Martha. I think that's it. So, well, if someone wants to get in touch, both Martha and I are on Twitter. The video will be on Civil Society Media's Instagram and YouTube both. Also, you should subscribe to our news bulletin, which is free and goes out at lunchtime every day. I shouldn't probably say it because I write part of it, but it is good. And yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Martha. We hope you enjoyed it. Like last time, we'll be putting out details of the next Instagram Live in a few days. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.